Morris joining me as we do every Monday. Let's talk first about the Fair Work Australia statement out today. Grahame Morris, we saw that George Brandis earlier was suggesting if the government now doesn't intervene, make this Fair Work Australia report out into the public domain, then the government should be accused of a cover-up. Is that going too far?
No, actually, look, I think the Senate, it'll go to a Senate committee. I think it will be released. I think it should be released. You know, even already the General Manager of Fair Work Australia is sort of dropping hints everywhere, you know, that there has been most improper activity, probably 105 punishable individual pieces of activity, another 80 that probably should be, somebody should get a whack around the head for, but not going to. And you think, well, but they're having real difficulty in a legal sense getting this into a proper legal criminal court, which seems to me that there's still something wrong with the system. But you know, by innuendo, even the Fair Work people themselves are saying, look, enormous number of breaches, the majority of them by a former official of the union. Not saying that it was a former official who's a former Labor person who's now sitting in the Parliament as an independent. Not saying that. But the innuendo is there. And look, we're going to have another report on all of this in July. And unless there's a bit of transparency and open it up, this is just going to bleed all over the front pages, whereas, you know, if it's all open, it might be all over in a week.
Well, I spoke with Cathy Jackson earlier. Bruce Hawker, she was suggesting that the timing of this is suspicious, that we've had this statement from Fair Work Australia coming out on Budget Eve. Is that a bit far-fetched to suggest some conspiracy there?
Oh, probably. I hadn't thought about that, Ashley, but I do think that they should release the report. They should table it, give it parliamentary privilege and let people crawl all over it. Or if they don't, then we're just going to get more and more calls for it to be released. It'll look like it's a cover-up when, in fact, I think it was just a proper thing for her to be doing, not releasing it because there weren't protections against defamation and so forth. So solve that problem, release it, let people go over it and make up their minds about it. As to whether there's criminality involved, well, clearly they're saying there's no criminality. It's either a case of criminality or not. So it looks to me like this is one where civil prosecutions will follow, but not criminal ones. So let's get it out. Let's get it out.
They're saying, Bruce, they don't have the power to enforce the criminal side of things, but they also don't have the power to give it to somebody who does have that power. So the Act at the moment is just a little bit tidy, and I suspect that, well, you know, I think most people would think that it's about time that the government actually sorted out the Act so that this crowd can do their job properly.
Well, I do think that the report should be tabled. I agree with that, and I think otherwise it actually drags out the issue even further for the government. So, in defence of the government, I think they should actually release the document and let people make up their own mind about it.
Well, I can't remember being in Canberra the day before a budget and talking about anything but the budget that's happening tomorrow. It's been really overshadowed by this Fair Work Australia statement today. We've seen this tough rhetoric again this year. Wayne Swan suggesting that he's going to find billions of dollars of savings in order to reach the surplus that he's talked so much about. Bruce Hawker, we always seem to hear this tough talk, though, from Wayne Swan before the budget is released, and often the rhetoric hasn't actually matched up to the outcomes of the budget. Do you think this time he's serious?
Well, I think he's always been serious. I just think there have been issues that have come along, like global financial crises, which have got in the way. Look, they've thrown everything at this budget to balance it and to make sure that it stays balanced. I think it's an easy spin line for Joe Hockey just to say, oh, it won't be balanced in the long run. They'll have to make sure it's balanced because there's going to be an election in about 12 or 15 months' time, and it's going to be one of the big issues. So, yes, stringent measures are going to be introduced. Some good support, though, for school kids and for people that urgently need dentistry. There's good packages there, good Labor-friendly packages, but there's some tough stuff in it as well, and I think they're serious about making sure that it does balance. Otherwise, they'll pay a price for it in 12 months' time, and they can't afford that to happen.
I might just, we're seeing some vision now on the screen. I might just see if our studio crew can lift the audio. This is quite an awkward conversation between the PM and the Treasurer a little bit earlier during one of these things we call a picture opportunity. Just have a little listen into some of this. Oh, sorry, we don't have that audio. We did play it a little bit earlier. It was very awkward chit-chat with the Prime Minister and the Treasurer there. Sorry, I just threw that one on the studio crew. That was all my fault, not theirs. Let's talk about what we know is going to be in this budget. We've seen the leaks as normal, Grahame Morris. One interesting one is this education payment for parents. The government going to be giving this lump sum, $410 for every child in primary school, $820 for every child in high school. This is something that Joe Hockey has been saying today is trying to compensate for the carbon tax that's coming in the middle of the year. But isn't this a good idea? It's a scheme that was there already. No one was taking it up, so the government's saying, well, we want to make sure that this is dished out.
Yeah, well, I don't think even this government could muck this one up. It's actually quite a nice little bribe to families, and people will accept it and say, well, thank you very much. But, you know, they're still going to get hit with the carbon tax and all of those bills, and that's the bit that's going to be awkward. Look, I have some admiration for any individual who puts together a federal budget. It is hard. But it seems to me that at the moment, while Wayne Swan is sort of working his tail off, the government's heart's not really in this. And I think they are all looking at this with one thing in mind, and that is this Prime Minister and this Treasurer have to shift 90,000 votes every month for 18 months to get back to where they are now and where the Parliament is now. 90,000 votes a month. Now, is this going to do it? And I don't even think the Treasurer at the moment knew which way to go. Yes, he had to have a surplus, but he's got a tiny surplus, but he's still sort of giving away stuff to try to be politically clever. And some of it, I think, is politically clever. But this is, you know, is this going to be the big turnaround, the big saviour? Well, I suspect that before the next budget, the Prime Minister and maybe the Treasurer probably won't be there, and we'll have some new people who will be tweaking all of these figures. In other words, maybe the budget's not going to last.
Well, of course, we know it will be a surplus, probably a small surplus, as you point out, but today the Treasurer is calling it a fair go budget. Have a listen and then the reaction from Joe Hockey.
It'll be a surplus budget, but it'll be a fair go budget as well, supporting low and middle income earners, particularly with the school kids bonus, but also support for small business and the first steps in terms of the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Wayne Swan doesn't know whether he is Santa Claus or the Christmas Grinch. On the one hand, the government's making large announcements, handing out money, and on the other hand, they're talking about tough cutbacks.
Is this a confused budget, Bruce Hawke, or is that just what Treasurers do, give with one hand, take with the other?
Since time immemorial, sometime around about the Fisher budget in 1900 and something or other, they would have started doing that, and they'll continue to do it. Look, I thought the $820 school kids bonus actually was very well received, certainly well reported in the media over the weekend. It was the best bit of news that the government's had for some time, and so I thought it was well placed to identify with people who are doing it tough right now. You know, we hear constantly, quite rightly, that cost of living is a big issue for people. There is concern about other imposts are going to come with the carbon tax. There's going to be a compensation package put in place for that as well. But padding, you know, the budget with some of these good announcements, at the same time as taking away with some other tough announcements, I think is going to be well received by people who need it. $820 is a significant amount of money to help school kids in secondary school, $410 in primary school. Not amounts of money to be sneezed at. So I think it's well pitched to an electorate that is, feeling the pressure at the moment.
Well, I think we'll be talking plenty more about the budget in the next couple of days. Just finally, I want to show you a tweet from Bob Carr. He says in relation to the slipper allegations, this Ashby seems more rehearsed than a kabuki actor. Today, he was defending those comments, saying the coalition should explain itself, otherwise people will think it looks a bit fishy. Grahame Morris, was that comment on Twitter wise?
Well, I think I got myself into my own lot of hot water over this issue. Look, but on the whole picture, I think tomorrow morning when the Parliament resumes, there ought to be one action, and that is the Speaker is invited to stand in the Parliament and just explain himself. You know, everyone is guessing at what happened, everyone has their own view. But, you know, just the idea of the Treasurer saying, look, I'm out of here and I'll do the right thing, I don't think that's good enough. I think he should be invited to explain what happened so that the Parliament knows and so that he has a chance as the Speaker of this Parliament, very important post, to have his say, because at the moment it's all outside the Parliament, it's all innuendo and it's all sus. And unless he does that tomorrow, I think it's just going to build and build and build. I don't think the Premier did him, or the former Premier did himself any favours there.
Was it appropriate, do you think, for the Foreign Minister to make that sorts of comments raising doubts about James Ashby? Bruce?
Well, I thought the main focus should really be on Christopher Pyne, who's changed his story more times than he's changed his undies in recent days. And if anyone's going to stand up in Parliament and explain what they've done and when they've done it, sure, Slipper might want to do that, but I think Christopher Pyne might want to do it as well.
All right, well, that's going to be another interesting twist to Budget Day. It's going to be an abnormal one tomorrow, and we'll have full live coverage for you, of course, here on Sky News. Bruce Hawker, Grahame Morris, appreciate your time as always. Thank you for that. Coming up...